But for the time being, let's start off with our opening segment, this week's questions from the coaching hotline. Starting off with our most voted question from this week, a question from Perilous Pear, who asks, "What's the appropriate way to build Ultimate Charge on D.Va?" Very simple, innocuous question. Start you off with an easy one, Gunther. Do you want to take this?
I can.
Go for it.
All right. So that's a kind of that's actually a more interesting question than maybe we think, but it comes down to like hero playstyle, right? Because D.Va doesn't really have a way to consistently farm alt charge. Sure, you can try and like toss out some micro missiles to do some spam damage, but for the most part, you're not really gonna be, tossing dynamites around a corner. You're not gonna be, doing anything crazy. D.Va is a hero based off in your alt charge specifically. It really comes down to like how consistently your team is fighting. D.Va gets her most alt charge during like a real, team fight. So if your team isn't team fighting, then you're probably not going to be getting a lot of alt charge. Try to stick to your main tank and poke at the people who are fighting your main tank, but otherwise, farm is not really a thing you can do. Maybe cultivate is a better word.
Yeah, my answer to this would have been just you don't play D.Va to build alt charge. It's like you play D.Va well, and the alt charge comes later. You're just maintaining uptime as much as possible. You almost like very rarely would you even like throw out your micro missiles for spam, unless like it's very early on in a fight at long ranges and stuff like that. You want to save them for more opportune moments where you can actually like secure kills and stuff like that. But as long as you're maintaining good uptime and you're staying relevant during a fight, like the alt charge will come. As long as you're maintaining good focus on targets you should be hitting, good use of your cooldowns to say useful during a fight and all that stuff, but you don't really focus on building alt charge. It's not like Zarya where you're going to be like tossing right clicks every chance you get to build an extra grav charge. You don't really have anything in your kit as D.Va to really do that. It's more just about generally playing the hero well. From Scar, he asks, "As I play more, I realize that my biggest weakness as a main tank is that I'm just really not good at making actual plans. What should I be doing inside and even outside of the game to make me improve?" So I'm going to take this away from like the actual plan making to shot calling. So when it comes to shot calling as a main tank, when you're in game, the biggest thing is just making sure that you're taking in the right information to know whether or not what you are trying to do is feasible, if you can actually do it, if you and the rest of your team have the capability of following through with whatever action you want to be calling. And then through practice, I've seen Scar play before. I've heard him in game. He's quite vocal, but it's really just about being consistent in your calling and being consistently not just about like you're always calling something, but you're always calling something that makes sense. And again, I would say the biggest thing comes down to what knowledge you have of your team's availability to follow up on your plan. So if you're calling move in a specific direction, but you have no idea where your team is, say you're playing like Reinhardt or something, and you're telling them to rotate through a choke, but you don't realize two members are still coming back from spawn, it's not the shot calling that needs to work. It's not the plan making that needs to work in that situation. It's your awareness of the situation around you. From there, once you are taking in all that info and processing it correctly, it really comes down to consistency. And it's kind of like when you want to make individual decisions, you start just making team-wide decisions when it comes to shot calling, and you can limit test the same way. So if you think you want to make something aggressive happen as an individual, you can instead call for that to be a team play. And again, I think from the main tank's perspective, this is most easily translated to shot calling because you're going to be the one moving forward for your team a lot of the time. And then if it works out, that's great. You can keep up making calls like that. If it doesn't work out, you need to ask yourself why. These are the kind of situations you might need to go into a replay viewer to see the bigger context of what was going on around you. And really just keep pushing yourself to make more and more aggressive calls as long as you sort of check all the boxes leading into that situation where you have your team with you, you have cooldowns ready, you're at full HP, all this kind of stuff. And then it's like, can my team feasibly make this action happen? If so, it happens, and that's great. If not, what happened or what didn't I see that made that sort of fall apart? That would be my advice. It's a tough one. And I guess the question mentioned specifically, how do I practice even like outside of the game? I really don't think you can practice outside of the game. Like at best, I would say go into the replay viewer and look at situations where you called for something to happen, but it didn't work out, and then find out why. Whether that was because you didn't have enough information, your team wasn't ready to follow it up, or your team just got outplayed.
Yeah, and so actually, so I guess this is a bit of a shameless plug. There's a class that we're going to be running soon, that I'm going to be running soon, about how to properly shot call in games, and the way we're going to be doing it is, or not shot calling, but like how do you fight plan, in terms of like if you had perfect information, and we're going to be going through a bunch of owl games and like looking at screenshots and being like, all right, if you're this team in this scenario, what do you think you can do? And if you have the time to do something like that, I'd recommend you like look at some owl games and see how like people are doing different plans and say, okay, they're going into fight with these things, well, what are they going to do here, right? Like if you try and imagine yourself, if you were in their shoes, what you would be shot calling, and see how that goes.
My question to you, good sirs, is if I'm playing ranked, and obviously so what would normally happen is they pick like normal, say, rush comp, Ryan, Zarya, May, McCree. I'd take BAP because I'm like, I want to work on my BAP, I want to practice my flex supports, my this, that, the other, and then the other person picks Ana. Obviously it's a lot of heals, but then when they start moaning saying like, we need a Lucio, we need this, that, the other, like, I don't play Lucio, like I am really bad with Lucio, but I'm like, should I sacrifice the stuff I'm trying to learn and work on myself to sort of help the team and aid in reducing toxicity in that game to try and win? Or should I just be like, well, nah, screw you, I'm going to play my BAP because that's what I want to work on, kind of thing? Like, what balance should I have?
I think I'm equipped to answer this question as the guy who coaches.
Go for it.
But essentially, if your guys are playing like a brawl comp and you're on BAP and then the last guy picks Ana, you can say, hey, can you go Lucio here? Because I don't really know how to play him, and I think he'd be good in our comp. Talk about it before it's like, before people start bitching and moaning about it, because then it's like a conversation, right? And then everybody's mad at each other, and then it's like it's a whole thing. But if you just start, if things are happening and you start by saying, hey, I don't really know how to play Lucio, but I think he'd be really good. Could you play the Lucio, other support player? And you word it like very nicely, right? You don't word it as Ana's a shit pick, you need to go Lucio. You word it in a way that is, and this isn't that non-committal thing I was talking about, because we're not in game yet, so it doesn't really matter. But in that moment, you're allowed to say like, hey, can you do this thing? Because I don't really know how to do that thing. And I think that's probably the way you should go about it. In the middle of a game, if people are starting to like have those conversations and bitch at each other, I think it's super fair to communicate that, hey, I don't know how to play this hero, and just be very open and honest about that. Don't try and like blame it on the other person or something and be like, well, this guy should have been on this. And just be like, I don't really know how to play the hero. Hey, Ana, do you think you maybe could play Lucio? Not as a Ana, you need to play Lucio right now, but just like hey, do you think you could do that? Because I don't know how to do that, right? It's a lot of conversations in games is about wording. As a coach, I'd say commit to practicing what you want to be practicing. Commit to doing what you're trying to do. And try not to flex.
Yeah, because I was thinking of it in terms of that thing, like you said to me, doing the right thing all the time, no matter what. Do you know what I mean? And obviously in my mind, I'm like, well, no, BAP's a better pick here, or you know what I mean? Like, it's just, it works a lot better. Or like, say, obviously not that I try not to compare sort of, I say stats in games because I don't care about like the medals and stuff, but like if I know like I'm putting out a lot of healing and I've saved like Ryan a couple of times with Lamp, or I've, you know what I mean? Like I feel like I'm playing really well. And then like I say, not having to swap off, but feeling like you have to swap off is really like, well, what's, like it can be like a dampener, if you get me.
Yeah. I would honestly just say like, communicate that like your limits as a player, and say, hey, I don't know how to play this, but I think this would be good. And then if people start getting mad at you about that, you can be, hey, I told you I don't quite know how to do that.
And like there's so much more than just hero picks that go into it as well.
Yeah, 100%. I'm just in the opinion of like, if you're very open and honest before it gets to a point of aggression, then people are usually pretty cool with that.
Gunther, you said you focus more on like concept and theory, and then taking to, I guess, if you have thoughts on this as well. It could be useful. When people are selecting coaching videos for you to give, obviously, they could pick anything. What would typically be best? Like a video where they know they did bad, or like a video where they thought they did good, but they ended up losing? Like, what would be best in your opinion? First, or both, I guess.
So I'm in the opinion that VODs from just starting about like the actual like game, VODs from scrims and officials are better to review than ranked games. However, not everyone plays competitively, so that's just. But if you do play competitively, then looking at a scrim VOD or looking at something from an official I really like that. Additionally, the generic is a loss where the game was close, because that means it was an even game and your mistakes were punished. Usually, as you work more and more with a coach, Tickety probably has his own way of doing it. But if I'm trying to focus on a specific idea or subject with somebody, I'll say, hey, I want you to focus on these things. And then I want you to send me our next VOD together. I want it to be one where you looked at these things and tell me how you think you did, right? But that really evolves over time. The generic is a loss where the game was close, and then as things go, as you work with a coach, we'll probably be requesting more specific things from you.
Okay.
Yeah. The only rule of thumb. Oh. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're gone.
Wow, we're too polite in here.
It was just God damn it.
You go.
All right. No, it's just it's just thoughts like what would be good to like submit for like a review. Like that's all I was trying to get. And maybe like somebody else in here found that useful. Like, oh hey, if I do good coaching, this type of video would be best.
Yeah, like Gunther said, like as long as it's close, like as long as it's not like a completely unwinnable or unlosable game from your perspective, it should be a fine VOD. When you're targeting specific areas and you want to highlight those areas specifically for higher level players or for people who've been getting extended coaching sessions and stuff like this, you can look to target those specific areas. But for a generic first time VOD, I'm not really sure what you need to be working on, these kind of things. Exactly what Gunther said. Any generic VOD where it doesn't feel like your team could not have lost regardless of how bad they played because it was just a huge team diff, or just felt completely unwinnable because the enemy team was way stronger than yours or something like that. As long as there's close fights where you could have been a difference maker and maybe made mistakes and maybe got punished, those are the best VODs to look at. Welcome.
Hey, bud.
Also, thanks Tickety for telling me to never stop one tricking.
Well,
no. You're enabling him? Oh no.
Let's just move on to the question. Let's not worry too much about this.
My question is, how do you stop your team from tilting, or how do you play around it?
That's a tough one.
That is an incredibly vague question. Is there a specific scenario in which popped this question for you?
No, it's just play it.
All right.
I would say number one thing, when you are playing ranked as opposed to in a team environment with people you trust, it's very hard to change people's minds about anything. So if they are deciding to be angry about something, even if you are the most calm, rational person trying to explain another side, and even if that other side is just, please don't be mad, they're not willing to hear it most of the time. I would say, unless there's something that needs to be shut down from what they're saying, like if they're calling out another player and they need to be backing down, stuff like that. But if they're just tilting and just yelling aimlessly and stuff like that, I would say your best bet is not to interact too much with them. Try to maintain focus on what you're trying to do. If you can, contribute to communication, but keep it objective focused, keep it based on the game, stuff like that, and just try to take attention away from the child yelling at the birthday party. It's very hard to say anything to someone who's tilted and have them come off of that and be untilted. So the best you can do is try to divert their attention away from whatever it was that started tilting them and focus back on what the game is. But again, generally you don't do that by interacting with them, but by just being straightforward about what you're trying to do and stay focused back on the game itself.
Yeah, directing it to another putting the team's attention in another place is a really good way to do it. Guys, this Widow's killing our whole fucking team. Wah, 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 wah. And then instead of being like, well, actually, it's this, then this thing, you go, hey, so next fight, let's do this. And then you give a fight plan or something, right?
Just ignore it and move forward.
Yeah, you, like, if, like, something I learned from Dota is that if somebody throwing doesn't get attention, they'll stop doing it. They'll throw a fight, they'll throw like maybe 2 or 3 fights total, and then they'll stop doing it because they're not getting attention.